Property Freedom Formula is a step-by-step system so you can go and find
あなたの栄光は地に満ちている。なんて麗しい、なんて麗しい。イエス・キリストのその麗しい名に勝るものはない。なんて麗しいイエスの名は。私の罪も全部包んだ愛により、私をあなたから離すものはない。なんて素晴らしい、なんて素晴らしい。イエス・キリストのその素晴らしい名に勝るものはない。なんて素晴らしいイエスの名は。なんて素晴らしいイエスの名は。賛美しますよ、あなたの名を。罪も死もあなたの前で静まってひれ伏す。吠えろ天よ、永
I chose Wix for my business because of its massive scope for functionality and
主をたたえよ魂よ聖なる名を心すべて捧げ賛美します日が昇る今日もまたあなたに歌おうどんなことが起こったとしても賛美歌い続ける主をたたえよ魂よ聖なる名を心すべて捧げ賛美します愛あふれ優しい神あなたのしてくれたことを何も忘れないように歌をくれたあなたへ主をたたえよ魂よ
Good evening.
聖なる
Just turn the speakers down. Just turn the volume down. There we go. Evening all, welcome. It's really lovely to be here on a Sunday night and I'm not responsible for it. It's such a joy to just be able to sit back and watch really. So welcome, Anthony's going to be leading us through tonight. Yeah, we're going to be having a taste of Japan in many different ways. So let me just pray as we start, and then I'll hand over to Anthony. So Father, we thank you for one another. Thank you that we can be together tonight. Lord, thank you for the sunshine and the food we're going to have. Thank you for the friendship we share together. And we pray that tonight you would inspire us, you would help us to get interested and excited about the nation of Japan and how we can be involved at whatever level. So please help Anthony tonight, Lord, and be with each of us and us all together as a group. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm not quite as tall as John, so I might just have to... There we go. Earlier John said, if you learn one thing this year, make sure you don't buy a cheap microphone stand. So I guess that's my takeaway from today. Anyway, that's why, right? Alright, I think we're alright. Okay. So, as many of you know, I went to Japan for a month with a mission organisation called OMN. And their group, which Mike over there is very involved with, and they're focused on sharing the gospel in East and Southeast Asia. And broadly speaking, I got to serve in several different ministries, and I got to learn about the joys, but also the challenges of mission over there. So, the main reason I went to Japan was because of our mission partners, Chris and Kezia Payne. And this photo is a photo of the whole family, and it's taken just outside the OMF headquarters in Tokyo. I know some of you know the Paynes well because Chris, as I mentioned this morning, he was actually a student at Stas University, and he came to Park when he was here. And it's actually here at Park where his faith really grew, especially when he was speaking to Howard. And it's where his heart for sharing the gospel with all nations really grew as well. Chris and Kezia are the field directors in Japan OMF, which broadly means they're responsible for over 140 missionaries and all of those teams that are over there. And I'll tell you a bit more about them a bit later. So tonight we've got about 5 different parts, and we're just going to start with Japan itself. So I wonder what comes to mind when you think of Japan. Maybe you think of big towering skyscrapers like this in Tokyo. Or maybe you think of futuristic things like robots and AI that you see in the news. Maybe you think of more kind of old-fashioned tea houses and temples like this one that's taken from the Royal Gardens. Or if you're quite big on the food, maybe you think of things like sushi and ramen. Well, let me give you a brief overview. Japan, it's an island nation, and it's in the Far East Asia, right almost on the other side of the world, as you can see on the map. It has a population of about 123 million, which is just over double what we have here in the UK. And that population is spread out over about 14,000 islands, although there are 4 main big ones, which is this map. You've got Hokkaido in the north. You've got Honshu, which is the mainland, that big blue one in the middle. You've got Shikoku, and you've got Kyushu. It's a really, really beautiful country with really amazing landscapes. And the one you probably all know, or at least recognize, is Mount Fuji, which is this one on the picture. The capital city is Tokyo, and this is where I did most of my ministry. And it's huge. It's a huge city, and it's really dense. I tried to find a map comparison, I couldn't, but there are 14 million people living there, which is roughly a quarter of the population of the UK. Imagine that, a quarter of the UK living in one city. And just in case you're wondering, that's not the Eiffel Tower, that's actually a radio tower, but its design was inspired by the Eiffel Tower. So what about the people? Well, the people of Japan, they have a really different culture to us here in the West. That's a photo of one of the groups that I got to know in the English outreach classes. And I'll tell you about them a bit later. But with a few exceptions, the Japanese people, they're a very corporate culture. And that means that they kind of think together and they value uniformity for the sake of peace and social harmony. Or in other words, it's really important for everyone to think and behave in a very similar way in order for things to be peaceful. And that's pretty different to the individualistic worldview of the West over here. I found people were really, really respectful when I was in Japan. If you have a conversation with anyone in Japan, you'll notice that they'll do a sort of head nod, which is actually a bow like this when they're talking to you. And they do it so much, especially when they're saying things like thank you, that when I came back to the UK, I found it really hard to not do this when I'm speaking to people, especially in the shop. I say, I'd order something and I say, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I got a few weird looks. But it just shows you a bit about the respect in the culture. People are also very good at being careful and mindful of the people around them. They have this term which is called reading the air, which I guess is similar to reading the room in English. And another kind of funny example of respect I found was if you go on trains, they literally have adverts that say, please keep your headphone sound quiet so you don't disturb your neighbours. Which, if I'll be honest, I think was aimed at tourists, not at Japanese people. Japanese people are also very safe. In fact, it's got one of the lowest crime rates in the world, and it's one of the only cities where I feel like I can walk around in the middle of the night and I'll be perfectly safe. In fact, if any of you are cyclists, you can probably relate to this, which is if you've got a bike, it's not like London where you need to lock up your bike like 6 times to a pole. You just lock the back wheel, you walk off, and no one's going to steal it. That's not because punishment is really harsh over there. It's because it's part of their culture of respect and being considerate of others. People simply just do not want to steal. So what about Japanese people thinking about foreigners and foreign things? Well, there's 2 kind of loose attitudes they often hold. And the first is having a healthy curiosity towards foreign things. A lot of the friends I made in the photo, they were so interested in asking me all about Chinese culture and also the UK, also being confused at why I wasn't Japanese as well. But they were just so interested. And in fact, you see it in their culture because in their alphabet, they have 3 different systems. And one of them is called katakana, which is this. This is literally a sort of alphabet that they use for imported words. They try to imitate the sound of foreign words. And a funny example for me is this. Ice cream is aisu krimu. It sounds interesting, but every word that you can say in English, there's a way to sort of try and pronounce it in Japanese. Other examples of interest in foreign things is actually one of the other writing systems. Kanji is borrowed from traditional Chinese. So if you look really closely, there's some subtle differences, but I'd say it's pretty similar. The kind of second attitude that's held at the same time is a strong national pride. So although there's this big interest in foreign things, many Japanese people still find it important to identify as Japanese and keep what is Japanese about them the same. And that's in order to stick with that corporate nature, that social identity. So next, just moving on to religion. Well, Japan is something called a pluralistic society. And that means it's normal to follow more than one religion at the same time. In fact, there are 2 main religions in Japan that pretty much everyone follows, and that's Buddhism and Shintoism. So Shintoism, it's the only religion they practice which actually comes from Japan, and it's animistic, which means it's a belief in kami, which means gods or spirits that live in nature and control events around them. It's the origin of most Japanese festivals, which is like this picture above. I think it's called Gion Matsuri, and it's a festival with its roots in appeasing the gods and spirits that are normally responsible for causing earthquakes and other floods and natural disasters. Another example is that most family rites are also Shinto. For example, when children reach certain ages, they're usually dressed up in traditional clothes, taken to a shrine, and then they pray to the spirits and gods in thankfulness, but also asking for good fortune and health. Another example is weddings. Brides normally wear a traditional kimono that is red, and that's pretty different from over here in the West where we have white dresses. Or even if you're walking around, you will see a lot of Shinto shrines that are dotted around the city. And if somebody is walking past one of these shrines, which you can identify by these torii gates, so the red thing on the left, if someone's in a rush and they're walking by, they'll still stop, they'll turn towards the shrine, and they bow out of respect to the spirits. And in fact, the one on the right is one Chris Payne and I saw on our first day. I think it was about 5 minutes after I met him when we were going for a walk, and we literally saw a couple of people go past his shrine, running past it, stop, bow, and keep going. The other religion is Buddhism. It's the other religion that they follow, but it mostly comes to play when it's about death and your ancestors. Unlike weddings, most funerals are actually Buddhist, and there are usually multiple funeral ceremonies, and they're carried out by a Buddhist priest in order to appease or please the deceased soul. And that's because the Japanese have this kind of unspoken fear that if a dead family member is not happy, then they'll come back to bring bad fortune upon the family. Apart from that, apart from funerals, if the ancestors are happy, I guess, then there's actually a belief that they'll bring good luck on the family. So in the house of each oldest son, there's this sort of altar, which normally has photos of the most recent family to pass away. And it's here where the oldest son is in charge of maintaining this altar, keeping it clean, and offering food and money sacrifices to keep the ancestors happy, and so to bring them good luck. So with this worldview, it's really deeply ingrained in people that they're connected to their ancestors in this way. And that can become a real barrier to those seeking Christ. So moving on to Christianity. Remember that question I asked in the beginning. What do you think of when you think of Japan? Well, one answer to that is that it's a nation that really needs to hear Jesus. Despite being quite a developed country that's safe to be a Christian around, it's really unreached. Less than about 1.5% of Japanese people are Christians, and most churches, including the ones I went to, they have less than 30 people. So actually, we, right now, if we were meeting on a Sunday morning, this would be considered pretty big. It also takes, on average, about 11 years for someone who is seeking Christ to come to faith. And about 80% of those people fall away within the first year. So whilst there's amazing work that God is doing through his people in Japan, overall the church is actually shrinking at the moment because a lot of these people coming to faith are quite elderly. So why is that the case? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and I just want to outline two of them. And the first is this, that foreign religions are seen as dangerous, including Christianity. And partly that's because there's been a lot of events that have happened over the years of terrorism or suspicious events that have thrown religions like Christianity in the fire. So just last year, the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, he was murdered. And when the murderer was caught, he told them that his mum had been bankrupted by this cult called the Unification Church, or the Moonies. The murderer then said he blamed Shinzo, the former president, for kind of promoting this religion in this Unification Church. And the thing is, most people don't know the difference between a cult like this and Christianity. They lump them in the same boat, and that grows a huge bit of suspicion. And the second big reason I want to share is that Jesus calls people to turn away from all other religions. And that includes breaking away from your ancestors. So just imagine for a sec, you're Japanese and you're born in Japan. And for your whole life, everyone has that same belief. Imagine more than people just telling you that you're connected to your ancestors. But you grow up doing all of these rituals, all of these ceremonies, all of these Shinto things and these Buddhist funerals. That's all you do. That's what everyone does. To you, that Buddhist belief is not just an opinion that some religious people hold. It's your actual reality to you. Now imagine that you've been seeking Jesus. You've got to know these Christians. And at first you're quite excited. But then one day you learn that Jesus is the only way. That you do have to say goodbye to all other religious practices. For you, you've got to not only throw away a religious belief, but you've got to throw away your connection to your ancestors. It's a thing that really just shatters your whole worldview. All those prayers you did growing up, all those offerings you did, all those festivals you went to, all those moments of connection to your ancestors, you've kind of got to say in your mind, none of that's real. And even if you can convince yourself it's not real, there's still probably a part of you that has to actively cut yourself off from your family. That's what it often feels like. And then imagine the implications for your family who are alive. You can't join in their ceremonies anymore. You won't go to the altar. And if you're the oldest son, that's probably where it's the hardest, because you have to say, I'm getting rid of this altar. Someone else has to take it. So that's really one of the big reasons why it's so hard to become a Christian in Japan. Now, there's many other examples of challenges, but those are the two main ones that I wanted to share. Now, I think if the rice is ready, we're just going to move to a section where we're going to be making some Japanese food called onigiri. Put your hands up if you know what onigiri is. 1, 2, okay, 3 people. Okay, all right. So, it's basically this Japanese rice snack. And what we're going to be doing is we're getting sushi rice, or something that looks like sushi rice. We'll be making it using our hands, so in a second I'll get you to wash your hands. You put it in one palm, and then we're going to put a filling in. So I've got mostly tuna, but I've also got a sweet corn vegetarian option, just for Kaylee and Harriet. And then you kind of wrap it around, form a ball, and form it into a sort of triangle shape, and wrap some seaweed around it and eat it. It's a simple snack, it's a bit of fun, don't worry if you get it wrong. I'll demonstrate at the front in a moment, but we're just going to get the food out. So whilst you're waiting on your tables, you can probably see, I know some of you started, you've got some origami sheets of paper and some instructions. There's 2 I've given you. One is one of a heart, that's probably a lot easier, so I'd say if you're not sure, start with that. The other is the paper crane, which I don't think is too bad. So if you're feeling brave, why not have a go at that? Hello? Hello? Hi everyone. In a moment, I'll be demonstrating how to make one over here. So if you'd like to make some, please make sure you wash your hands now.
主をたたえよ魂よ聖なる名を心すべて捧げ賛美します主をたたえよ魂よ聖なる名を心すべて捧げ賛美します賛美します賛美します
Hello. If you'd like to know how to make the onigiri, I'm just going to demonstrate now. So just kind of stand around the table and I'll show you. Hi everyone. Oh, that's loud. I think we're just going to crack on for the interest of time, but that's okay. So, I'm just going to give you a really brief overview of kind of the ministries I served of in Japan. So, OMF is the organisation I went with, and it's an organisation that seeks to share the gospel across East and Southeast Asia, as I mentioned earlier. OMF doesn't actually stand for anything anymore because they need to kind of keep the name a bit more subtle in sensitive countries, but it used to stand for Overseas Missionary Fellowship. It started work in Japan in the 1960s, starting from the north in Hokkaido, and they've kind of worked their way down south, and they've got as far as Tokyo at the moment, but actually the rest of the south half of the islands, they're mostly unreached at the moment. So I went with a short-term mission group called Serve Asia, and it's a program for anything between 2 weeks to a year. And I spent 3 weeks living by the headquarters, which is here in the picture, and then I spent 1 week living with the Paynes at their home. So I did quite a few things. I think I'll just outline my favourite ones for time's sake. But I served in a church called Harvest Church. It's a church plant in West Tokyo. And they have a bunch of outreach led by a couple called Tim and Wakako Clark. And the main ministry I helped with was something called English Practice, which I'm going to try to explain through a story or through the perspective on the man on the left of me, over there with the jacket. I'm going to just pretend his name is Mr. T and go from there. So imagine this is Mr. T and imagine that you're in his shoes. You're a recently retired journalist in Tokyo and you've got an interest in the English language, although you don't get to practice much. You have a lot more free time on your hands, and then one day you get a flyer through your door that speaks about free English classes at a local church that's only 5 minutes away. Now, at first, you're a bit suspicious because it's a foreign religion. Can you really trust those people? But they've got free English lessons, so why not? So you go along. When you arrive, you're quite pleasantly surprised because everyone's really welcoming and really kind. And then you're really surprised because there's someone who's obviously American called Tim, yet he speaks flawless Japanese and he seems to understand lots about your own culture. So you decide to stay, and you make friends with quite a few other Japanese local people who are kind of in a similar boat to you, but mostly retired and all wanting to practice English. You spend about an hour learning English together, practicing how to say where your favourite restaurant is or what's on your bucket list. It took a while to explain what bucket list was. But you do that, you have a load of fun. And then later on, you move to a talk time. And then somebody comes up and they tell you about a man called Jesus, but they say it in Japanese. And you're surprised by how comfortable, but also how safe you feel with everyone there. After you've had that talk, you go to tea time and everyone gets hot drinks out and you just continue chatting socially to everyone around you. And as you're chatting to everyone, you're already starting to think about next week's lesson. So that's the story of Mr. T. He'd been going for quite a long time. And that's the kind of typical layout of an English lesson, which they have 3 different groups every week, and also a 4th German class, which is run by a lady called Sina, who's wearing red in the photo. It's an amazing form of outreach because you really get to know people properly. You get to build those friendships of trust where people feel safe to be talking about Christianity. When I was there, I was only there for 4 weeks, so I actually only met each group 4 times. But in that time, I got to know everyone's names, I got to know their favourite hobbies, their favourite restaurants in Tokyo, where they want to go on holiday, where they want to avoid going on holiday, things like that, you know. And I just really got to know them. So actually, in 4 weeks, it was quite sad to say goodbye. Another outreach by the same church, which I'll just outline, is Kids Outreach, which has some similar ideas, but without a direct evangelistic talk. Whole families come along, the kids and the parents. There's a bit of English kind of practice, and that's just me reading out an English book. And then there's playtime, and during that playtime, the team members get to know the parents. And in fact, if you see the man on the left, he's kind of right on the edge of the photo, he's got a white shirt. He was having conversations with Tim about the Bible, and he's the one who actually brought it up, not Tim. And that's the kind of friendships that start forming. That's the sort of trust that can form. Another ministry I served in is homeless ministry, and this is something that I want to tell through another story. Imagine that you're Japanese, you're living in Japan, and then one day everything financially goes down the drain. So much so that you've become homeless. Then you turn to your family hoping to get some kind of help, but because you've lost face, you've brought kind of shame on your family by becoming homeless and by becoming bankrupt. They don't want to help you, so they turn you away. So you turn to your friends, but it's the same thing there. They don't want to associate with you. So you're an outcast from Japanese society itself and even your own family. But then one day you hear that there's a group of Christians that comes to Tokyo every Thursday, and they hand out a load of food. They talk about a man called Jesus. But importantly, you hear they give out a lot of food. So even though you're a little bit skeptical about Christianity, you just want to get any help you can. So you decide the next Thursday to go along, and you hear these people talking about the man of Jesus. And you hear how he can bring you from a position of shame to a position of honor. Then you hear a few prayers, and then they hand out loads of big bags of food, and you're just amazed at how generous and loving these people are being when even your own family and friends don't seem to want to know you. You go and take the food, you fill your belly up, but as you finish that food, you start to wonder, could that promise of being restored to honor, could that be really true? And then you start hungering for more. So that's the kind of story of lots of people on the streets. We saw about 80 people every Thursday. And the team is made up of Japanese locals, including quite a few people who came to faith through this ministry. In fact, they're the ones who normally cook all the food. I was going to talk about some other things. I did things like returning ministry and helping out with the guest home. But you can ask me about that later if you'd like. But I made a lot of friends when I was in Japan as well, serving alongside a lot of people. And this guy, that's Tim. He's a different Tim to the guy at church. There were 4 Tims when I was there. It's really confusing. Also, all 4 Tims were American, which is even more confusing. But this is Tim. He's the guest home manager, and we just became good friends. And we're still in contact now. I messaged him literally last night. Apart from that, I also went to Chris and Kezia's church. I'm afraid it's not the best photo because I wasn't really focused on taking photos when I was there. So this was right after the service when they were packing up. But it's a church called New Creation Church. And it's led by a Japanese pastor called Miyoshi-san. And this whole service is held in Japanese. So that's all the songs, all the notices, all the prayers, the sermon. And Chris kindly translated everything line by line live in front of me, which, by the way, if you've ever seen that, it's really impressive. But he translated the whole thing. And one of the noticeable things about the sermons I noticed was that he's very quick, the pastor, he's very quick to link the Bible to aspects of culture, including, for example, talking about the spirits and gods in nature, part of Shintoism, when he's talking about the kind of spiritual world. So next I'm just going to tell you a bit about the Paines. And as I mentioned earlier, they're one of our mission partners here at Park. And if you look over there, on the top right-hand corner, you can find some information about them. So I'm just going to tell you a bit about them before getting to their actual OMF roles. So, back. First of all, at the top you've got Chris. Now, Chris stands out in Japan already because he doesn't look Japanese and he's British. But he's really, really tall. I don't think the photo does it justice, but he's actually really tall, possibly taller than Luke Webster. And he stands out in Japan. And he's just so bubbly and so kind of energetic. He's one of the only extroverts in Japan HQ, apparently. And you can literally talk to him all day. He's also always got that huge smile on his face whenever you're talking to him. Kezia, his wife, Kezia, she's a very, very busy, active person. Like every day, she's always thinking about who can she meet up with, who can she be a blessing to in their life. She's also the only member of the family who doesn't like this Japanese food called natto, which I know Matthew knows what it is because he introduced it to me. I'll explain it another time, but she's the only one in the family who hates it and she hates the smell of it. The rest of the family love it. Caleb, so the boys, I didn't actually get to meet the boys this time because they're currently abroad, but Caleb is their oldest son on the right. And he's actually here in the UK. He's at, I think, Loughborough University. He's a really keen racing cyclist, and he's also a member of the CEU. Jonathan, or his nickname, Jonjun, is the son on the left, wearing orange. He's currently in India studying at the International School of Hebron. And he's in his final year of A-levels, and he's planning to move over to the UK soon. And he plays a lot of football there, and compared to everyone else, he's pretty tall, like his dad, so he's known as the big man. Then on to the girls, so on your right is Karis, wearing the blue. So Karis is at International Secondary School in East Tokyo. So they used to go to a Japanese local school, but then they go to an international secondary school. And she's super talkative, like her dad, like really, really talkative. And she's very musical as well. She plays the piano in her spare time, and she's just taken up some singing lessons. And then finally, we've got Megumi, who is on the bottom left, and she's the youngest. And she's actually really, really, really quiet, unless you get her excited about something or you give her some sugar. Guess how I found out about that. Anyway, they're a lovely family, and something is a bit of a side thing, but side kind of tangent, but I was just really encouraged by living with them. I spent the last week of my 4 weeks living with the Payne family, and I've never actually lived with a Christian family for more than, say, a day, and when I was with them, I just could see God's love in their family, just each themselves, but also for each other. They would always be very loving towards each other in their actions, but they'd also be very conscious of God in their day-to-day lives. They'll be praying for the next step of the day, not just before a meal, or not just before a Bible study, but just the mundane, normal things they'll pray for. And they'll do things like Bible studies after dinner as a whole family, and you could really see Chris and Kezia kind of working as a team, trying to show them the glory of Christ. And it was just a really beautiful thing to see. And yeah, I couldn't help but think, if I had kids one day, I would really want to learn from them. But anyway, they were my hosts during my trip when I was there. And that meant that they met with me on a regular basis to check up on me, to see what kind of work I've been doing, and answer any sort of questions I might have. And with OMF, their main roles are as field director. And I'm actually going to ask John to play the video now, because they're going to tell us a bit about their own roles, and then they're going to share some prayer points, and then we're just going to spend about 5-10 minutes praying. As well. So Chris, you're field director at OMF. Why don't you tell us, what does that mean?
Yeah, so we have a team of 140 missionaries here in Japan, and about 75, 80 children that we're responsible for. And my role involves kind of overseeing the whole of that, which I mainly do by leading our field leadership team, which is a team of 7 senior leaders that take care of different parts of our fellowship. A particular focus for me is our strategy and our long-term vision, and how we're going to go about planting churches and partnering with Japanese churches here in Japan, as that's been one of our big focuses over the last 3 years. But day to day, you might find me talking with missionaries about issues that they've got, visiting partners to talk about how we can work together, but then also handling kind of legal and regulatory matters to make sure that we kind of follow all the rules and regulations that the Japanese government and others give us.
Thank you. And Kezia, tell us about your role and involvement in OMF.
Yeah, thank you. Just thanks for letting Anthony come. He's been a real blessing. So my role, I'm part of the field leadership team that Chris leads, and separate to that, I'm also what's known as the Third Culture Kid Advisor. So I help families who've come as missionaries to make education decisions, to learn how to live in a foreign culture and what they need to put in place to support their family in that kind of situation.
And maybe the last thing I should say is we are also part of a small church plant here in our town as well, and but a Japanese pastor, but we try and help out where we can, and Anthony's been coming along on a Sunday with us.
Lastly, how can we as a church, how can we be praying for you, both for OMF and the work here in general, but also for your family?
Thank you. This year, our prayer theme, our prayer focus for the year is seeking the Lord for a year of fruitfulness. So please pray with us for that. Please pray that we will bear fruit in our own lives, grow in Christ-likeness, that will be really rooted in the Lord Jesus and bear the fruit that he wants us to. But please also pray for fruit from gospel seed that has been sown over generations. 150 years of kind of gospel sowing, but very limited harvesting in Japan. So please pray for fruitfulness, that we will see people turning to the Lord. Please pray with us for that. As a field, as OMF, one of the things we've been doing is really spending a lot of time thinking about our future church planting plans. We've done a lot of research and talking to our partners about what they're thinking. And we've just kind of come to the end of a 2-year process. And pray for that. We're finishing that up in the next month, we hope, and then we pray that that's going to lead to some good opportunities for future church planting and partnerships. And then I think just day to day for us, the leadership role is full and busy, lots of challenges. So pray that we can walk closely with the Lord and have wisdom and humility and Christ-likeness in our leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I would add, please pray for our children. We've got 4 children, Caleb, Jonjan, Karis and Megumi. Please pray that they would walk closely with God. Jonjan's just about to start, he started his A-levels and then we'll be moving to the UK. So that's a huge transition for him coming up. And we're actually visiting the UK this summer and we're looking forward to seeing you all and thanking you in person. But thank you so much for supporting us, for praying for us, for remembering us and for sending Anthony.
Yeah, it's been great to have him.
Yeah, really lovely. And he's very good at washing up. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'll see you soon. Whoa, I teleported from Japan, I'm quick. I'm a bit conscious that we've overrun already. John, I was thinking of some prayer time. Is there 5 minutes? So on your tables, you should see a sheet with lots of prayer points on it. The top kind of 2/3 is a summary of what Chris and Kezia said, with maybe 1 or 2 extra points, and then the bottom third is a few points on the ministries are served in and prayer points for them. So we spend about 5 minutes and just pray for a few of those points. We'll be drawing our prayers to a close in 1 minute. Okay, so I'm just going to finish off really, really briefly about prayer and how you can be praying not only for Japan but for anywhere in the world. So, just getting to this slide. Who here in this room knows what Operation World is? Good, oh, amazing, amazing. So for those of you who don't know, Operation World is a set of resources that is geared towards helping you think and pray about any country, any nation in the world. And typically they've got this big book, and if you open it up, you can literally turn to any country. There's an alphabetical order, and it will have a whole load of things like an info sheet. So this is Indonesia, and it tells you a bit about the country, where it is, its population, religion, some stats, and then it's filled with a whole bunch of prayer points. And for those of you who prefer something a bit more digital, you can download the app on your phone on both Apple and Android, and I think you can just go on their website as well. And one way I would encourage you to use this resource is whenever you meet somebody new, or you meet somebody from a culture that's different to yours, have a go at then going away and opening that country in your book or on your app, and thinking about how you can be praying for that country. And maybe next time you meet that person, ask them about their perspective and how they can be praying, you could be praying for them and their family. Another example I like is if you hear something on the news. So Israel and Gaza, when that popped up, you could immediately pop up this book or the app and look to those countries and see how you can be praying for them beyond just what you hear on the news. If you'd like to pray for missionaries specifically, like anybody on our board over there, a good idea would be to try and get in contact with them, which you can do by speaking to me, and getting their prayer letter. So this... Oh, there we go. This is an example of the prayer letter that the Payne family release every month. They've both got this PDF copy, but they also have a web copy, which is a bit nicer to scroll through. But it's a great way of keeping in touch and seeing how you can be actively praying for missionaries that we are linked to at church. So that's all I've got to say today. Just one quick note. So Mike over there, Mike and I, we've been talking about relaunching something in church called the Global Vision Team, which some of you might remember. It was a team here in church that focused on helping all of us pray for nations around the world. So that used to run, then for certain reasons it stopped for a while, but we're going to be relaunching it soon. So watch this space. That's all for tonight. Thank you very much for coming.